C-13 dispatch. The whole bridge just fell down. Start, whoever, everybody. The whole bridge just collapsed.
Simple dispatch is direct.
That's correct.
This time.
Do we know if all traffic was stopped?
I can't get to the other side, sir. The bridge is down. We're going to have to get somebody on the other side, the Anne Arundel County MSP, to get up here and stop traffic coming northbound on the T Bridge.
C-13, I'm holding all traffic northbound.
Several evenings ago, a large freight ship coming into the port of Baltimore lost all power, which meant it lost steering, it lost propulsion, and it was drifting uncontrollably. And unfortunately, it was at a point where it was coming under the Key Bridge in Baltimore, which is a long stretch of bridge in Baltimore. And it impacted one of the main support stanchions that hold the bridge up and completely took out that stanchion. And within seconds, the entire bridge from one side to the other collapsed into the river. Fortunately, they sent out a mayday a minute or two before, and the public safety and police were able to stop traffic on the bridge. So we didn't have that many cars on the bridge. And the only people that actually went into the water were a overnight work crew, construction crew that was tasked with filling potholes on the bridge. They do that at night so it doesn't impact traffic that much.
I need one of you guys on the south side, one of you guys on the north side, hold all traffic on the Key Bridge. There's a ship approaching that just lost their steering. So until you get that under control, we gotta stop all traffic. Yeah, if we can stop traffic, just make sure no one's on the bridge right now. I'm not sure where, there's a crew up there. You might want to notify whoever the foreman is, see if we can get them off the bridge temporarily.
And there were 8 workers there on that construction crew. I believe they were on a break. They might have been having a meal, but they were on the bridge, and they all fell into the water. 1 was rescued in the water, 1 swam to shore, 6 more were unaccounted for, and I believe overnight or into the next day they found, unfortunately, 2 bodies, and I believe they have 4 of those workers still unaccounted for. So I was a diver for the FBI. I led 2 of the FBI dive teams for about 19 years, and we responded several years ago, in 2007, in fact, to a bridge collapse in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I think the conditions are probably somewhat similar. Here, you've got the divers are going to be faced with massive amounts of debris from that bridge, and that means huge chunks of concrete, twisted steel, rebar, and of course the vehicles and the equipment that was on the bridge that work crew was using to fill the potholes. So you might have construction trucks and things like that. The problem in that type of environment is that the water tends to move things around. And in Baltimore, you have tidal action, you might have currents, you might have wind action that tends to move those big things around. They could easily crush or trap a diver underwater. So the divers have to be very aware of their surroundings when they're underwater. You combine that with the limited visibility that might be there, and it's a very, very dangerous environment for divers to be in. So what we did at our bridge collapse, and I think that it's pretty standard, is that divers, to minimize risks, where the hard hat dive helmets, we had what we call Kirby Morgan 77 stainless steel dive, the ones you see in movies and pictures, the big steel helmets, and that will protect the divers somewhat from falling debris or moving debris that might impact, their head area. The second thing is surface applied air. So you're not on scuba, which is self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, but you have a big umbilical that attaches you to the surface, which does a couple of things. It gives you, obviously, number one, it gives you your breathing air so you can stay down longer. If you get trapped, somebody can come down and follow your umbilical down, find you and help you. You have plenty of time. You won't run out of air. It also, that umbilical has a camera on it so the people topside can see what you're dealing with. It might have an element in that umbilical might have the ability to use tools, cutting tools, saws, plasma cutters that the U.S. Navy uses to cut through things, and to cut concrete and cut steel down there. So that umbilical, which also is your lifeline to the surface, is used to retrieve you when you're done with your dive. They literally pull you up by that umbilical, and that's the way we used to operate. So those 2 main things, steel hard hat diving helmets and surface applied air, are the 2 things I think that are at a minimum to keep the divers safer than a standard rescue diver from a fire department that might be on a scuba rig. Unfortunately, the likelihood for someone surviving this type of incident is very small because you have basically two things happening at one time. You have basically a car crash. When that bridge collapses and that car either hits the concrete and then goes into the water or hits the water itself, it's like having a full impact car crash, and then you're in the water, then you're underwater very quickly. So you have two things happening that really minimize the chance of a good outcome or survival. Now, it does happen. People survive sometimes. And overnight, I think they were still holding out hope that maybe some people, were in an air pocket or something. But the water was very cold. I think it was 48 degrees, and you go hypothermic very quickly in water in that conditions. And even if you're inside a car, you're going to be wet. You're going to be probably injured. So in this type of scenario, we generally don't see a very positive outcome for survivors. We usually advise people that if they know their car is going in the water, you have to think very quickly and act very quickly. You have to get once you impact the water, you have sometimes a few seconds before the car actually sinks because you have air in the car. Lower your window, get your seatbelt off as quick as possible, lower your window, and then get out of that car as quick as possible because it will take you to the bottom. Even if you go to the bottom in, say, 30 or 40 feet of water, I know that's very frightening to people, but one breath of air can get you that far. As long as you don't panic and you get yourself out of that vehicle, swimming to the surface from that depth can still be possible. You should let out the air slowly so you don't have a problem with air bubbles into your bloodstream. But it is possible. The main thing is, free yourself from any encumbrances. In other words, a seatbelt. Most people don't carry. I do, and some people do, but most people don't. One of those cutters, a seatbelt cutter. It's a very specific device. You can keep that in your door pocket. You should have one on each side and in the front in your door pocket. Those things cut through seatbelts. Seatbelts are very hard to cut with like a standard set of scissors or shears. But one of those things is designed to actually cut you out. So if you can get yourself out of that seatbelt, obviously you don't want to do that before you impact the water or the debris that's falling, because that is a danger in itself. But once you impact, act quickly, get your seatbelt off, and then make sure you're getting that window down and getting out, because car windows are designed not to be broken very easily. They're designed to shatter and stay in place so that when you're in a car accident on a highway, all of that glass doesn't come falling in on you. So tempered glass is designed to stay together, which in an underwater scenario, that's a worst case scenario because now you can't get out. So the key is to get that window down and free yourself from that seatbelt. They have to download as much data as they can from the ship's onboard computers to see what happened. That's what you want to find out, what happened. Now, ships like this should have redundant backup systems of propulsion and steering, which are separately powered. So if you lose power, if your generating plant loses power, you go to emergency power. You have a separate backup generator that automatically kicks on. So you have minimal operation. So it won't sustain the entire ship, but it'll give you steering and propulsion. And so they have to figure out if the ship had that, if it did, why it failed. Because failures happen, but accidents don't always result from them because you have backup systems. Sometimes you have two backup systems. You have triple redundancy, but on a very minimum, you should have a redundant system that's powered off of a separate power supply that if you lose the main power supply, it automatically switches over and gives you at least minimal steering and propulsion so that you can steer the vessel and you can stop the vessel. Boats don't have brakes, so reverse propulsion is how you stop something in the water. So they have to determine, if the ship had all of its proper systems operating. They have to look at the maintenance records, see if the crew was trained in those emergency procedures when something like this happens. Training is important. Having those backup systems is important. Maintaining your maintenance records and your proper maintenance on the vessel are very important. All of that is going to be hopefully looked at in the investigation. And then, of course, we have the separate instance of actually rebuilding the bridge, which can't happen until all of that other bridge debris is retrieved. So they're going to have commercial diving outfits come in, probably is presumably paid for by the shipping company, to come in and remove all of that debris, and then they have to start planning out and building a new bridge. That endeavor, simply to get all of that old bridge out of that water so that you can start planning a new bridge, is a long time, and then building the new bridge, of course, is going to take quite some time. If the shipping company was not keeping the boat up to standards and wasn't having the proper emergency equipment on board to kind of keep that ship from crashing in the event you lose main propulsion and main power. I don't know what rules they operate under, what regulations, but you may have regulatory violations. You may not, and that's what the investigation has to reveal. You also have a loss of life, so you could have, depending on the level of negligence, if they find negligence in upkeeping the ship or having the proper procedures and equipment on the ship, they could find criminal negligence, and criminal negligent homicide is a criminal act. And so then you have to figure out who gets charged with that. And I'm saying if that's the case, that's what has to be investigated. If there was negligence in maintaining the ship, I'm not saying there was, but if there was, and that investigation reveals that, then somebody can be held accountable criminally. Now, obviously, all of these types of instances result in civil lawsuits. There will be civil cases filed by many people as a result of this. And so the civil court system is a little different. The standards are different and the rules are different. But there could be also criminal violations by the company if the investigation turns out that there was negligence to the criminal extent that's required by law.